What's up, guys? Welcome to the Chess Giant. This is Solomon Ardell, and in today's video we got episode 2 in the current season of the subscriber game analysis series when y'all send me in your own games and they have a chance to get analyzed on the channel. Now, today's game comes from my guy Honorbon, a long-term subscriber whose game wasn't perfect. In fact, he found himself in some trouble at one point, but he kept the fight, kept the pressure, and found a beautiful sequence to finish the game out and get the dub. Here he is playing with the black pieces, and his opponent started off with d4. We now see d5 and following c4, e6. Here black declining the queen's gambit. And now after the moves knight c3, we see knight f6 followed by c6. Here black forming a pawn pyramid, a very solid structure that's hard to play against. You can use this in your own games as black or as white. Here we see the move knight f3 from white, and now just continued development. Bishop e7, and here white captures on d5, and now as black we have a big decision to make, and it really just depends on your style of play. I personally like to take with the e-pawn in a position like this, and this is the most popular response at the master and grandmaster level, taking with the e-pawn, opening up this bishop a little bit. But c takes d5 is also extremely playable, and we've seen this at the elite level as well. Here we see bishop d3, and following knight c6, white castles kingside, and now from Honorbon, bishop d2 and rook c8, just continuing to develop his pieces. I love how Honorbon isn't just pushing his pawns like crazy, but trying to get all of his pieces involved, including this rook on c8 on the very open file. And now from white, we see bishop d2 and black castle kingside. Now, in a position like this, I generally would recommend white to play moves like rook c1 or queen e2, eyeing e4 ideas, maybe even knight e5 at some point, even right now, to try to get an edge in activity in space. But guys, I think that white needs to keep improving the positioning of their pieces and really trying to get these back rank pieces involved. Here we see the move knight e2, and I'm not going to sit here and say that this was a blunder by any means, but I would say that it's potentially a little bit passive. It does eye the squares of g3 and f4, but white needs to be very careful not to play passive from this point forward, allowing black to simply break through in the center and get an active game. Here from black, we see a6, and here we see white now play the move knight e5 in the center of the board. Honorbon plays the best move here, and that's just taking that active piece right off the board. But now after d takes e5, we see this move knight e8, and I actually consider this to be a slight mistake by Honorbon. The reason being, guys, in chess in general, if you have an opponent's pawn on e5 and you bring your knight all the way back to e8, in this instance, I don't think it's a good idea. There are some opening systems in which knight e8 is a good idea, the King's Indian defense being one of them, preparing that f5 push. But guys, in this position, our knight can barely even move because of that pawn on e5. There's nothing even close to attacking that pawn right now. And on top of that, it's limiting the activity of our bishop. And now with our knight on e8, our rook is also very passive. Our light squared bishop on d7 is also very passive, and our queen on d8 isn't great either. Our only active piece right now is this rook on c8. We have 5 inactive pieces and a 2x3 square radius, and I'm just not seeing how black can get out of this very easily. I think instead of playing knight e8, the better move was knight e4, attacking the bishop. Whole idea being, we want to take that bishop off and get the bishop pair if this bishop runs away with a move like bishop e1. Okay, we'll play knight c5, a very active square for the knight, much better than that square on e8. And here the big question, okay, if white takes that knight, I'm actually okay with this, because after d takes e4, yes, our pawn on e4 is a big weakness, and white can go after this pawn, but at the same time, we can go after the pawn on e5. Both of these pawns on e5 and e4 are weak, but we as black can continue to play active chess. Here, if white even plays a move like knight c3, trying to attack the pawn, we have some options here. The computer likes moves such as rook c5, attacking the pawn, or even rook c4, defending that centralized pawn. But a more natural option for black here is just bishop c6, defending that pawn. And notice here, we now have a more active game. We have an active bishop on e7, and if you look at the bishop on d2, it's simply a tall pawn. We're going to continue to play active chess, continue with moves like queen c7, attacking the pawn, or queen b6, eyeing that pawn on b2, put our rook on d8, have 2 active rooks on that back rank, and we're just playing chess. All that to say, guys, we did not see knight e4, but instead knight e8, bringing this knight to the back rank, in which black's position is a lot more cramped now. White continues with b4, simply expanding on the queen side. And honestly, I think that this was a little bit slow. I like if white would really try to take advantage of the king side and play moves like f4 and knight d4. Not like b4 is a bad move, but I think that this gave black a little bit too much time. We see f6 from Honorbon, a solid move, really just trying to undermine the center. And after f4, we see a capture on e5 twice. Rook takes f1 with check. and then this move, knight c7. Again, guys, I mean, this knight is just not looking like a good piece right now. It can't move to f6 or c7, so the best thing this knight can do in the future is play a move like knight c7. But guys, again, what is this knight really doing? I mean, it can't move to b5 without being captured, and right now the only two squares this knight can go to is e8 or a8. I mean, a8 is one of the worst possible squares that you can have a knight in chess because it only attacks two squares. And as we talked about, this knight on e8 isn't doing much but limiting black's activity and making things a little bit cramped. So black has a tough position to work with here. We see knight f4 from white activating their knight and putting a little pressure on e6 and d5, e6 especially. And now from black, this move bishop g5. Now y'all, here white plays the move b5, but let's flip this position around and look at this from the white perspective. Guys, here I actually like the idea of queen b1. How on earth could I ever come to a conclusion like this? Well, let's look at the piece placement of black's current setup. Right now, black has 4 pieces all in a square, c8, d8, d7, and c7, with only one bishop on the king side of the board. Besides this king on g8, black only has 1 piece on the king side, and the rest are all in a little bundle on the left side of the board. Guys, here if we want to attack on the queen side of the board, I honestly just feel like this is helping black. What we should be thinking about is, okay, I mean, this king on g8 really doesn't have a ton of protection. It's going to be hard for this knight to do anything at all. Obviously, this knight on c7 can't come to e8 and be a good defending piece on f6. And it's just going to be a hard position for black to work with. So why not play this move queen b1 and really try to put the pressure on black? Whole idea being if a move like h6 trying to save the pawn, we're going to have complete control of the light squares on h7 and g6. Maybe even being able to play a move like bishop h7 check with knight g6 check ideas in the air. And if a move like g6, we can simply take that pawn right off the board and start playing aggressive attacking chess, aggressively going for the win. However, guys, back to the black perspective of things, we did not see this move, queen b1, but instead white continues again to push with b5. Guys, in chess, it's sometimes helpful to split the board in half, mentally speaking at least, into the queen side and also into the king side and going, okay, where are my opponent's pieces at, and is the opponent's king vulnerable? Right now, our king is very vulnerable on g8. Not like we pushed our pawns like crazy, but we don't have a pawn on f7, and on top of that, we don't really have many great defenders. However, here we see that move b5, and Arnerbahn simply takes that pawn off and then continues with this move b6. Again, I feel like white needs to play a move like queen b1 and really start putting pressure on the king side of the board. But here we see this move knight h3. I'm a little bit confused by this move. I honestly feel like the knight on f4 is a very active piece. Yes, this knight attacks that bishop on g5, but here we see bishop e7 from Arnerbahn. I think much better was bringing this bishop to h6, which in general, guys, I'm not going to sit here and recommend that you have a bishop on h6 in most cases, but guys, this bishop on h6 is much more active, and it does offer some kind of defensive presence instead of this bishop on e7. Here from white, we see queen e2, and now from black, d4. Arnerbahn trying to expand in the center of the board, break this game open. Actually, very creative move. This was white's last chance to get a one game, and that is with this move, queen h5. We didn't see this in the game, but just notice, guys, black doesn't have any real defenders on the king side of the board, and right now white is threatening to simply capture that pawn on h7. And if we play a move like g6, which, by the way, is the best option, white can simply take that pawn off, continue with a move like queen h6 check, bring this rook into the action. White now has queen g6 check and rook f7 ideas. White can rook lift this rook to a square like f3. We could also see ideas like knight g5 if this bishop ever goes to f8. Here white has an over +7 advantage, and I just don't see how black's going to get out of this one alive. However, guys, white missed this idea of playing queen h5 and aggressively going after this king, and instead simply takes the pawn back. And now from Arnerbahn, we see a very nice move. In fact, the only move that gives black a slightly better game, and that is this shocking bishop takes b5, really loosening up the position for black. All of a sudden, some of black's pieces are starting to see more activity. White here needs to play a move like queen to e4 or bishop to e3, trying to hang on to that pawn on d4. But we see bishop takes b5, and it turns out our main threat wasn't eyeing that bishop on d3, but simply capturing on d4, brutal check, attacking that king and that rook on a1. The very next move, Honorbond snatches that rook right off the board, continues by trading again. And guys, in a position like this, let's look at the activity of our pieces. What piece can become more active, and what weaknesses of white's can we try to undermine? Our queen on a1 is actually very active right now. It's hard for me to imagine this queen being much more active than it is. This rook on c8 is also very active, but obviously we can't play rook c1 even as we like to attack that knight, because our rook would simply get picked right off the board. But guys, what other piece can also attack this knight on g1? The answer is that bishop on e7. Why not play bishop c5? Honorbond plays this move, doubling up on the knight, and there's simply no way for white to hold on very long in this position. I mean, we see the move bishop c1, followed by queen e8 check. White here just trying to survive as many moves as they can. White is able to get in a 30th move, but at the end of the day, queen takes g1 is played. And guys, we have ourselves a game over. Thanks for watching today's video. If you'd like to see my top 5 chess defenses for black against the move d4, click that video to the left. If you'd like to see my top 5 underrated chess openings for white against the Sicilian defense, click that video to the right. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what other videos you'd like to see covered on this channel. And as always, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.